look, man, the Dallas Cowboys are doing things. There's conversations because, as always, it is, football season is always in action, even when it's not. And so at the Combine, you talk to various people. We've seen various reports, like we saw earlier today that Tyler Smith and his representatives and Tyler Biadasz and his representatives.
Tyron Smith. Yeah.
Tyron Smith, sorry. My apologies.
Not the youngin.
Yeah, I mixed up Biadasz, who is Tyler, who's also a Tyler, with Tyron, the man who wears knee braces on his arms, right? That big dude.
The future Hall of Famer.
That's right. He who is a free agent is both of those guys, actually. Biadasz, the center, Tyron, the left tackle. Both of them supposedly had meetings earlier today to talk with the Cowboys. And so those present interesting things. We saw some reporting that Michael Gallup, there's not a decision made.
Had a meeting.
He has had a meeting with these Cowboys, and there's supposedly not a decision been made about whether or not he will return to the Cowboys. I think a lot of people believe that he will be a cap casualty, especially as he's not lived up to the contract that he
I think he's
received.
the easiest cap casualty we could probably mark off.
I think so. And so there's a lot of things happening. I'd love to talk a ton about that, but I also want to get to this. Jerry Jones is talking. And
he is.
And he was talking not more than 30 minutes ago with some media folks. And so I found a few things interesting, as one of the other big things that we've been talking about is the Dak Prescott contract situation, right? He's going into his final deal, or for a final year rather, on the current deal that he has. He's set to run you nearly $60 million on your cap.
That's a lot of
when it comes to that hit. And so the extension, and we've had reporting from the Dallas Morning News that the Cowboys have kind of viewed this as maybe they don't get a deal with him. That's not something that's absolutely needed. So Jerry Jones talks about that and more. Let's start here with cut number one, where Jerry Jones was asked if this team can indeed be all in, even if they don't get an extension with Dak Prescott.
Absolutely, I do. Yes, I do. And because what is the all-in approach? The all-in, I'm not going to going all in if I don't get an extension. I don't have a situation like that.
Where do you stand with?
You just have to adjust where you're going, how you're going all in.
Okay. Extension, all in. What do you make of those brief comments there? I feel like you can always read deeper into Jerry's comments, but then at the same time,
Jerry be talking.
Yeah.
Right.
And at the same time, redact it.
Right. And so I think, man, the tough part about that is like what I took from it ultimately is that, and I guess I did not have the audio here, right? He did mention that, or I guess, look, let's get to this audio here because I want to talk about it, and I think that these things link up. So here's cut 2 of Jerry Jones talking about examples of how this team could be all in.
I've drafted quarterbacks for the future, okay? Mm-hmm. I would be reluctant to do that this year. That's an example.
Right. How does
and use a top pick for use our first pick for a quarterback this year for the future.
Right.
If you had an opportunity, there you are, 24, and the greatest thing since ice cream's he's sitting there.
Yeah, you'd be reluctant.
I'd be reluctant to do that this year. Let's call all into this year.
Okay, so we can take the J.J. McCarthy off of our boards, I guess. That's something that will not be happening.
But I think ultimately he was trying to illustrate the all-in comment that it seemed like Stephen Jones really did already kind of debunk by saying, I haven't known a year where Jerry Jones hasn't been all in.
Jerry said, I got you. Let me
Jerry basically trying to say, like, look, man, there's not going to be as much looking towards the future. But I do think that when you bring that in with like the Dak, the idea of they could be all in without like an extension on Dak, I think the idea being, look, man, this is just a worry about this season perspective, at least the way that he's talking about it. And really what that means to me is there's ways that they can negotiate his contract or his cap hit for this season, whether they get an extension or not. And that's the restructure, right? Yeah. And I think there's a lot of people that would like them to simply do the restructure, because then at the end of the season, you're done with Dak Prescott, even though you're not done with his cap hit. And that would take a big hit on the 2025 season.
Yeah, I think I'm in the more of the restructuring bag of, so we're going to go all in, but maybe do some signing bonuses, backload to the end, and make it just a 2025 problem and do your whole go-in theory right now. But When you sign that long-term deal, you are also getting the player. Like, it's not just we figured out the money for this year and we can go get these guys. Oh, yeah. Now Dak is on your team for the next 3, 4, 5 years, however long the deal ends up being. So it's an interesting thing to see how they navigate with going all in, but also seeing, do we want Dak to be our quarterback for the foreseeable future for a long time?
And I mean, look, at this point, the Jones family has made it very apparent that they want Dak Prescott.
Yes.
This new tone, especially the ones where we get kind of somewhat anonymous, thoughts through the media. Like this is the Joneses doing their thing where they negotiate poorly, might I add, through the media. Like the fact of the matter is they have, for lack of a better term, right? Like talking about this in simply win-loss circumstances. They've lost these negotiations well before we got to this point when it comes to Dak Prescott.
I mean, I was going to say literally just Dak. You don't even got to think of another player.
Right, no, that's what I'm talking about. Like, it's specifically with Dak Prescott. They lost these negotiations a long time ago. And so the idea that now they're getting out here and like, well, we don't have to get this done. And Dak Prescott, from his perspective, looks up and goes, fine, don't. You can't trade Dak Prescott and get anything back from him. Right. And,
that's in a win-win situation.
Right. Like, you're going to let him become a true free agent quarterback. Right.
Like, salary cap going, he's going to make even more money.
And yeah. So, look, it feels like kind of a moot effort in some ways, in the ways that the Cowboys have gone about that, especially knowing that they really, really want him to still be the quarterback.
And somebody's going to pay him that money. Let's not fool ourselves. As much as I know myself, some other people, fans, are not as high on Dak as we once were. He's still a top-of-the-line quarterback, and when that quarterback market keeps resetting, he's going to be at the top of it. He's not going to be a guy that's getting paid 15th, 16th best at his position. He's going to be top 5 at a position paid, whether the Cowboys do it or they don't, and they don't figure something out, and another team does it in the near future. So the money's going to go to him regardless. So if I'm in Dak's shoes, I'm feeling good. I'm kicking back and pouring myself a pina colada.
Yeah, which I know there's a lot of people that, look, man, they root for the Cowboys and not necessarily for the individuals, and so hearing that doesn't necessarily make them feel better. It's probably a longer conversation, but I have been really thinking about the kind of the standard operating procedure that we have kind of understood in the National Football League as being, if you have a quarterback over a certain caliber of play, you just keep them, right? Like that is you have to keep them.
The standard.
And with the higher cap hit that you are seeing as the salaries continue to go up and up for quarterbacks, does that shift, right? Like, is that shifting? And I know there's a lot of people that would immediately say yes, right? If you do not have a player somewhat even near the caliber of like Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen,
Burrow,
Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, right? If you don't have someone in that maybe like top 5, and not just the number 5, but those guys like in that caliber of play, then a lot of people think you do not give them that caliber of money, right? And I'm willing to hear you out on that. I think that then leads to the question of, what do you do with the quarterbacks that were previously above that marker of line of demarcation where we're like, okay, well, you got to stay with those guys, but that now exists below.
Yeah. I think a guy like Trevor Lawrence comes to mind, that everyone was kind of rising up their boards, and a guy that you're going to bet your future on, and now, not saying he's fallen off a cliff, but he didn't have the best year last year. Obviously, injuries as well. So I think there's room for both sides in the argument. I mean, I think someone put a stat out since Dak Prescott's been drafted in the league, only one quarterback that got drafted after him has won a Super Bowl. So it's not like these guys are coming in and just winning Super Bowls when they get. Now they might have good performances and get further, so to our eyeballs it looks better, but the end goal is a Super Bowl. And not a lot of different quarterbacks have done that, especially young quarterbacks. So it is kind of a catch-22. I think a lot of fans, myself included, have just kind of feel like the Dak Prescott experience may have run its time, but he probably is going to give you the best option for the next 3, 4, 5 foreseeable years.
Yeah, but ultimately the thing that I consistently sit with is like the Joneses, they're trying to win this negotiation, and I'm not even sure if it's admirable. It's kind of funny because, again, I feel like the circumstances are as they are, and I feel like Dak Prescott, Todd France, his agent, are already in place where they have this leverage here. In fact, I think Spotrac was marking this up as the predicted contract being a 3-year, $180 million deal. So then you end up with that average annual value of 60, and then it's kind of, you make it so that the cap hit in the first year is something similar to what would happen if you restructured, and then that
Yeah.
cap hit grows on the back end. And that's not necessarily a fun one when it comes to like the future of these things.
It's not, and I think the text brings up a good point from the 940. My worry is if you move on from a guy like Dak and don't have a decent quarterback, it's going to be hard to kind of re-sign guys, get CeeDee Lamb to want to stay and do this future contract. So obviously at the end of the day, we can have all of our opinions in the world.
Day.
Like you want someone that is compatible and your receivers want to work with and your coach feels confident in. And I think they spoke very highly of a guy like Trey Lance, but I think we can all agree he's probably not ready to step up into that starting position.
The Trey Lance thing is interesting because we got some news on him. Yesterday we found out that his contract bonus or his roster bonus would in fact be paid out to him, meaning that he is anticipated to be on this team this year. But they did not go so far as to guarantee and pick up his 5th-year option. Now they have a little bit into training camp to be able to make that decision on whether or not they pick up that 5th-year option. But this seems to be setting up in some ways for him to have a battle and try and take over that second quarterback spot from Cooper Rush.
I was just double checking to make sure my numbers are right. The reason they didn't pick up that 5th-year option is because you'd be paying your backup quarterback $22 million. That's what his 5th-year option would be. So I don't think it means that they're not going to keep him. He just will not be on the roster, and they might have to bring him back at a different negotiated price.
Sure.
So don't think just because they didn't pick up his 5th-year option that Trey Lance will not be on this team past this year. It just means, hey, if we were going to keep him, it had to be at $22 million marker, which is more than anybody's willing to pay for a backup quarterback. It just means, hey, we trust him enough to, I would say, probably be the 2 based on his information to pick up the roster bonus, unless you want Cooper Rush for another $2 million to be your 3rd string, or however you're going to, because Trey Lance will be making around $5 million. So I assume that they might bring him back at a lower price, and Jerry spoke very highly of him and his character. So it'll be interesting to see how that trajectory goes.
And just to do it, as again, Jerry Jones sat down with media today, I would like to play this cut here where Jerry Jones was just talking about going further into that notion of all in or not all in for these Dallas Cowboys.
Well, I will assure you there'll be some things done differently because we're going to be working on different players and drafting different people. And so just the very nature of it is different. Okay. Different people or different, we got different coaches. Right. But I think the attention that the nuances of where we are with the cap, the nuances of where we are with our position in the draft, the nuances of where we are with our free agents, that we get that involved in the definition of we're all in.
It's going to be different because they're drafting different players and they got different coaches. Which,
there we go.
Look, they do have a different coach. I talk about Zimmer and some of the defensive personnel.
And they will have draft picks.
And, well, they'll have some of them because
no 4th rounder.
I think that they should be getting. Oh my goodness, I forget what the comp picks are. But if you just look at the picks that they have a 1st, a 2nd, a 3rd, and 2 7ths. Yeah. So all of those middle rounds,
they need to fill those gaps.
I think they're supposed to get, if I remember, a 5th and a 6th in comp picks, comp picks. And so that will help, but there's a lot of places that they need to address, and a lot of positions that I feel like would be best addressed if you possibly could in those rounds. And so
I'm really excited for the draft because like we kind of mentioned throughout the whole offseason, as good as this team was on paper, there's a lot of holes that are popping up, whether it be age or contract. So a lot of retooling needs to be done in free agency and then the draft. Yeah, and
this is the tough thing about the all-in is that there are gaps that you can even create yourself, especially if you look at some positions where you want to get better. Center. Center is a position that I think a lot of people would like to get better, especially when you consider the fact that you didn't run the ball well last season. And I don't imagine having a smaller center helped in that way with Tyler Biadasz, right? But are you willing to create a gap at center? And now that's another hole that you need to fill with a draft pick. And
probably high.
A premium draft pick when you also still have maybe defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Definitely linebacker in a couple of places.
I think that's a great nuance.
Maybe cornerback, right? All these things are things that are going to have to be talked about. And so we'll continue to talk about that. There's a lot of time till we get to draft day in April. And so we'll continue to talk about that here on your home of the Cowboys, 105.3 The Fan.